Good evening. How are you? Okay. We on the right? Good. Okay. Yes, we're talking about the great American eclipse, so named because the only nation on the planet that gets to see it is America, and it goes across the entire country. This is the first time this has happened in nearly a century. We haven't had a solar eclipse in the St. Louis area since the year 1442. We don't get another one until the year 2505. So that's why it's a big deal. We get one. Your one-stop shop for anything you want to know about the eclipse is the URL that you see at the bottom of the page there. August 21st, 2017. It's also my mom's birthday, so that's nice, right? But mostly the one I wanted to talk to you about is the solar eclipse. Okay, so I'm standing here on a specific spot on Earth. I guess I should have made it red. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about the weird colors, but I'm colorblind, so if you think they're strange, whatever. Anyway, I'm standing to you talking from a very specific spot on Earth. Now, a couple steps behind me, if you went out there, you'd have a good view of the southern skies. That's what you need for the eclipse. Actually, trees are actually your friends in some way, but you do want to have a view of the sky. And if you notice that on the slide here, there's times that are specifically listed here of when the total eclipse starts and when it ends. And these are the times where what's called the umbral shadow actually passes over that spot on Earth. Now, if you're like me, you're looking at these times and you should be struck by how precise they are. This is down to the nearest tenth of a second, right? That's impressive. But it's going to take us 4 seconds just to say, you may now take off your solar eclipse glasses, right? But we know better than that. We can go all the way down to a tenth of a second, all right? So if you're wondering, like I do, how is it that they know how can they make a prediction this precise years in advance? That's what I want to talk to you about, because it comes from a model, and the model is just beautifully complex. And so I want to talk about a little bit, not just the eclipse, but also how is it that we scientists come up with these models, and how does the complexity come in? First, I want to tell you how it doesn't work. Okay? Scientific ideas are they're not written in stone, handed down by some authority figure. Okay? This is not the real picture, by the way, from that movie, right? Okay. I doctored it up a little bit. But anyway, so I just want to make sure that you don't miss my point. And so I've included this quote from the Next Generation Science Standards. Now, these science standards were created by a blue ribbon panel of scientists and science educators. And you can see what they're saying here. The quote says that the scientific method is a myth. Now, a lot of you might be surprised by that. But if you're a teacher listening to this, I urge you to research this on your own. Try to find out, what does this mean? Why are they saying that you're being duped by the textbook publishers, okay? If you're a student listening to this right now, I urge you to ask your teachers about this. Why do the Next Generation Science Standards call the scientific method a myth? And my big problem is with the word the, right? It's basically saying there's no such thing as the scientific method. Okay? Well, if we throw that out, then the question becomes, what do we teach our students? And the way I like to talk about it is that science is built with a scaffolding of consistency. What I mean by that is, when I finished my Ph.D. thesis, I couldn't flip to the back of the book to find out if I'd gotten it right. There was no answer in the back of the book for what I was doing. That's what a Ph.D. thesis is. But all we can do, the best we can do in science, is that our ideas are consistent with every other of the ideas. If they're consistent with everything else we already know about, then it stands a chance of making it into the edifice that is science. All right? The edifice, we scientists, we call that the literature. Okay? This is the body of work that people have contributed to for centuries. Okay, what is it we're constructing? The answer is models. We're making models of how the world works, of how Mother Nature does her tricks. I love this quote by Dr. George Box, and it says, "All models are wrong, but some of them are useful." And what I think he means by that is, no model captures everything. It doesn't capture all the complexity that there is in the thing that it's modeling. In each case, we're modeling some process in the real world, and they're all complex. That means there's a lot of pieces to them. As physicists, what we do is we try to get things as simple as they can possibly be. We start out by the simplest possible model, and it's not until we find out that something doesn't match with reality that we realize, okay, we went too far. We made things a little too simple, and now we have to bring back some of that complexity. So all models are less complex than the thing they're designed to model, and you never have the complete picture. There's always more to it. That's one of the reasons why we scientists are never going to run out of things to do. Okay? There's always more to discover. It's true. All right, I'll give you an example. There's a typical picture that you probably see in some science textbook. This picture is a model. It models the moon's orbit around the Earth. There's some things that it does right, and there's some things that it doesn't do right. And nobody says, well, if she said it's wrong, well, of course it's wrong. All models are wrong, right? But some are useful. So what is this useful for? What does this have right? Well, it has the names of the phases correct. It's got the relative orientations of everything correct, all right? But what is it wrong? Well, it's wrong because it's not to scale. The scale's all wrong. The moon's orbit is not a circle. And even worse, most important for the present, what I'm talking about now, is it's a two-dimensional model, all right? It's flat. So it gives one the impression that there should be a total solar eclipse once a month, and there should be a lunar eclipse once a month, because it's just a flat picture, okay? So the point is that this model is too simple. We've gone too far with it, right? You don't have the complete picture, but I argue that it's not until a student actually asks that question, how come there's not a solar eclipse every month? Until they ask that, they're not really ready for the answer. And unfortunately, the way we do education, we just march on whether they've asked the question or not. They have to own the question. It has to be their question. Okay, so we add some complexity to it. We say, well, okay, in reality, the orbit of the moon, the plane of the moon's orbit is inclined relative to the plane of Earth's orbit around the sun, and it's inclined by about 5.2 degrees, like you see here. Again, this model is partly right, and it's mostly wrong. So again, what's useful from this model? One is, well, they've gotten the angles right. So let's see, did I get this thing working? My prop was going to work. Oh, well. There it is. I guess you can't see it. I can't see it. I'm red-green, so I can't quite tell where it is. Sorry about that. I'll put that away. Good enough. Anyway, so they got the angle right, that 5.2 degrees, right? But the scale's wrong, and, well, see, it gives you the impression that, okay, if it's slanted, how come we ever have eclipses? You can't necessarily tell. Yeah, the bottom picture shows it, but I thought the orbit was inclined relative to the other one. So as soon as you get to that point where you realize something doesn't match with reality, well, we have to go on and add more complexity to the model. All right. In this case, we've added some complexity to it. We realize, okay, look, that plane of the moon's orbit moves around, but it always kind of keeps its orientation, at least according to this model, right? So what's right about this? Well, what's right is that this thing called the line of nodes, which is basically the line where the two planes are coincident on each other, when that line points at or nearly at the sun, then you can get an eclipse. When it points somewhere else, then you can't get an eclipse, because then the shadows miss each other. The shadows of one body miss the other body, okay? So in order to get an eclipse of either kind, either solar or lunar, you've got to have the line of nodes line up and point at the sun, all right? In reality, again, you don't have the complete picture. What else is going on is that plane of the moon's orbit actually precesses, and it actually precesses backwards. So what looks like should be, well, 6 months later, we should get another opportunity for an eclipse. It's actually a little bit less than 6 months, okay? And that difference is going to be important. I'll talk about that later, all right? But that's another complexity that you can't see from this simplistic model. Also, the moon's orbit is not a circle. This is data I got from NASA, Goddard Space Flight Center. You can get it online. This whole thing probably took me maybe 5 minutes to do. It's real easy. You download the data, you put it in Excel. I graphed a circle along with it so that your eyes could see what's going on. So I think I made it red. Did I make that circle red? Thank you. Good. So there's a red circle, And that's just to show you what a circle looks like, in comparison. You can see that the moon is sometimes further away than the average and sometimes closer than the average. So another thing about models is averages, when you look at an average, you lose information, right? You lose the fact that, hey, there's more going on than just what you would infer from the average alone. All right, so to summarize, here's the things that you need in order to have a solar eclipse, total solar eclipse. You've got to have the moon has to be in a new phase. You've got to have the line of nodes has to be pointing at or nearly at the sun, and the moon also needs to be relatively close to the Earth, near what's called perigee. Okay? What you also see in this slide is that every one of those physical phenomena, they all have specific periods that are associated with them. Okay? So a really good question to ask is, okay, if all three of those things are lined up today, right? And they will be on August 21st. But let's say, if all three of those phenomena are lined up today, when's the next time that they're all going to be lined up again? These three periods are all different. Will it ever happen that they get lined up again? Okay, everybody follow me on what the question is. And this is a math problem, right? So let's solve this problem with music. I'll bet you didn't see that coming, did you? Oh, right. Well, I'm a musician. I actually play with the Jefferson College Jazz Band. I play lead trumpet. I won't be playing tonight, but I like to think in terms of music. So what I've done here is I've related those three periods to musical notes. Just to sort of give you some background, 880 hertz, that is an octave above middle A on the piano, right? I wanted a sort of a higher frequency so you have more room to wiggle, so to speak. One thing you notice also is that the periods are inversely related to the frequency. All right, so the longest period is also the smallest frequency. I calculated the other one, so you see these fancy terms. Synodic is the period of phases from new moon to new moon on average. Anomalistic is from perigee to perigee. And draconic is the period of nodes that I talked about. You can see the different periods and then the frequencies that they correspond to. All right? The frequency calculations were done basically by just a ratio and proportion problem. We teach that in middle school. So this is a middle school math problem. All right? So I'll give you some examples. I'm going to show you what this is like, first-hand experience. So this is a program that I really love. It's called Audacity. It's a free program. You download it. You can get all kind of neat musical stuff with it. And what I've done here is I've put those three frequencies in. I laid down 3 tracks, real easy. And I'm going to play each one at a time. So this is that synodic period. Okay, just a 3-second pulse, the tone of it. And that's the top wave, the sine wave that plays that nice pulse. Here's the anomalistic. You hear the difference? It's a pretty big jump. Now, let's do the last one. Did you hear that difference? I didn't either. So yeah, I'm a musician, but my ear's not necessarily that good. Those are fairly close in frequency, not really that close, and some of the musicians might have heard a difference between those two. This last one was the sharpest one yet, the highest frequency. Okay? Well, another thing that Audacity can do is it can mix those things together, right? So I'm going to actually play all 3 notes at the same time. What you're hearing is 3 physical phenomena all happening at the same time. You remember that the cycle of phases doesn't stop just because one of the other periods is going on. That's pleasant, right? And you can see it, right? Could you see it and feel it and hear it at the same time, right? So what's going on is there's waves within waves, and if we zoomed in a little bit, you could see there's waves within waves within waves. It's got to be, because there's 3 levels of complexity, because there's 3 different notes all playing at the same time. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on this and take a closer look. Remember what we're doing. Well, I'm actually solving a math problem this way, right? So here's what I do. When you zoom in on this, you can take a look at the waveform itself. You can almost see the actual individual wave crest. Remember, 880 hertz, that means that there's 880 wiggles per second. okay? The top line there, I guess it's kind of a dark gray. You can barely see some numbers. Those are time stamps on this, okay? So the whole thing took place over 3 seconds. So I scanned this basically and looked, and I found this sort of a bow tie pattern, right? As you can sort of see the wave within a wave pattern. That specific bow tie showed up again, right? Everybody can see where my arrows are here. And so when you take a look at and measure the amount of time between the first bow tie and the second bow tie, you pick out some kind of specific piece of the wave. Audacity showed me that this was 0.2535 seconds between these two things. So that's the period of the whole thing, right? This is sort of that period that everything has in common. Where the cycle was at one point, it repeats again 0.2535 seconds later, right? Now, as it turns out, when you go back and think about the 880 hertz and the 941 hertz, that's just over 223 synodic cycles, just over 239 anomalistic cycles, and just over 242 draconic cycles. So round those down, take off that 0.1 decimal place, and let's check it to see if this makes any sense. So we take those numbers and we multiply them by the known periods of these three things, and we discover that all of these times line up. 6,585 days and a handful of hours. And out of those 6,585 days, everything comes together within a few hours. And that's amazing. How much time is that? Tell you. 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Man, 8 hours is important, right? I've never seen, I wasn't the guy to discover this period. Of course, this is pretty well known, but I've never seen it solved this way with music. It's kind of fun. It's like a STEAM approach, right? STEM is with STEM with an arts added. And I'm not trying to put anybody down, but I believe that ultimately speaking, this is essentially a middle school math problem. Now, the implications of this are that solar eclipses come in families, okay? So they are separated by that specific period of time, which we call a Saros, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Can you see that the first guy down is 1901, May 18th, the next one, 18 years, 11 days later. Can you see the 8 hours? In 8 hours, the Earth rotates by 1/3 of the way around. And so the next one is 8 hours later. And the next one after that, 11 years, blah, 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 8 hours later. After 3 of those, it comes back to about the same spot on Earth, okay? So the same kind of longitude lines are going to get it, and you see that it repeats after 54 years and change, all right? Beautiful stuff. This comes from, this particular cycle has been going on for centuries, and it'll keep going on for centuries. You can see that it slowly migrates from the South Pole all the way to the North Pole. So it's beautiful. How this stuff is related is building up one little adding little complexities here and there as you realize what I've got isn't quite good enough. And so I have to go back and I have to bring back some of that complexity that I threw out. But you don't have the complete picture yet. There's more to it. There's always more to it. There's always some complexity that we're leaving out of the story, right? In this case, this is a beautiful picture of a solar eclipse. These are what are called Bailey's beads. And they're formed because the sunlight is shining through canyons and valleys on the moon. And now we know what the moon looks like because we've been there and we've orbited it and we've made maps of the moon. And so we can even do better. The model, to that 1/10 of a second precision, we can tell you when the Bailey's beads are going to show up. We can tell you where to look for the Bailey's beads. Which valley on the moon are you going to see at your spot on Earth? It's amazing, amazing complexity, and it never ends, right? I believe that makes it beautiful. I believe there's real beauty in this complexity, and I hope that on some level I've given you some idea of how that complexity. The complexity is always there. It's just, do we know to look for it? And we don't know to look for it until our models don't match reality in some way, okay? So we think about these ideas, people might say, well, you know, what are we going to know in 100 years? What are people going to think? They're going to laugh at us. No, the ideas we have today are never going to be any more wrong than they already are, right? So this is kind of the way science works. So I hope I've given you some share of my love for this complexity in this interesting game we call science. Thank you.